Good morning and welcome to a session of Cooking in the Kitchen with Miss Humphery. Today we're going to be making caramel pecan fudge. So right now I want to go over the ingredients that we're going to be using. First we have 3 cups of sugar. We have 1 stick of margarine. You can use margarine or butter, your preference. Unsalted if you use butter. But I've tried butter and I've tried margarine, and the margarine makes a much better fudge to me. That might not be your preference. You can try and see. Also, we have here 1 cup of whole milk. I'm sorry, 1/2 cup of whole milk. 1/2 cup of whole milk. We also have a can of sweetened condensed milk. We have light corn syrup. And then we have some pecans. Now with the nuts, I like to chop them up myself so that I have a little of that dust. And it also spreads throughout and kind of gives the fudge a unified pecan flavor throughout, even if they're not pieces all over. And I also like a lot of nuts in my fudge. Some people don't like a lot of nuts, but I do. So these are the nuts that I'm using. You can use the amount that you like. I kind of like to use maybe 1.5 cups or even 2 cups, and then I chop them up. Also, here we have our extracts. So now, first thing is the pan or the pot that we're going to use here. This is what I call my fudge pot, and this is what I've been making fudge in for years. This is my best and most favorite pot to use. The first thing that you need to do, as you see here, I have taken some butter and I've gone around the pot. That's the very first thing that you need to do. Make sure that you thoroughly grease the pot. Not a lot, because you don't want to compromise your recipe, but make certain that it's thoroughly greased, and that prevents it, because of course you know that the fudge is a candy, so that would prevent it from sticking. So that's the first thing that you want to do. Then when we're gonna turn on our heat to about medium. If you have numbers, I would say around about 4 or 5, or between 4 and 5, depending on your stove. But you want to have about a medium kind of high heat like that. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is to put in the margarine and the milk. And you don't necessarily need to let your margarine melt, but I do kind of let it get in and kind of start to melt down. Not completely, but enough to start maybe cover the bottom. So that's what I'm going to do here. Let that melt a little bit before I pour in this milk and sugar. And while we're waiting on that to kind of melt a little bit, we'll go over those ingredients again. That's going to be about 3 1/4 cups of sugar. And 1/2 cup of milk. Now those measurements are precise. You have to be exact when you're making this candy. It's a science, so you got to be exact with this. So our measurements again are going to be 3 1/4 cups of sugar, 1/2 cup of whole milk, 1 can of sweetened condensed milk. We're going to be using 2 tablespoons of the light corn syrup, and then when we add the extracts, a tablespoon of each. A teaspoon of each. And on the nuts, that's your preference. You can use walnuts, you can use pecans, whatever you like. Almonds, it doesn't matter what kind of nuts you use. I've even made fudge, peanut butter fudge, of course, with peanuts. So it doesn't matter what nuts you use, and it is your preference on the amount that you would want to use. And like I said, I usually use 1.5 cups to 2 cups of pecan heads, and then I chop them up by hand. So now we've got this kind of melted as much as we want to have it melted. So now we're going to go ahead on and pour in our 1/2 cup of milk and our 3 cups of sugar. And then what we're going to do is stir that very thoroughly. And then add in also our 2 tablespoons of sweetened condensed milk. So oh God, excuse my error. I meant our 2 tablespoons of the light corn syrup. So we're gonna go ahead on and add that in. Okay, and that's our 2 tablespoons of light corn syrup. And we add that to kind of give it a gloss and a shine so it doesn't look dry. Then what we're going to do is just thoroughly mix this up. And yes, it's thick. And it's supposed to be because you're making candy. And what we're going to allow here is for this to come to a rolling boil. So we're going to stir it and continue to stir it. You don't have to just stand here and stir and stir and stir and stir. But you do have to stir quite often so that it doesn't stick. And so that you get it thoroughly mixed. So I suggest using a heavy whisk. This is a whisk also that I have used for a very long time. I've also used the ones that are not as heavy as this one, but it's like I said, this is thick as you can see, and it's kind of hard to use the a little thin when it may bend and get out of shape. So I suggest using a nice thick one. So now that we have we've mixed that well, as you can see. You want to get all the butter that you see around the edges. You want to make certain that's when you know it's thoroughly mixed, when the butter and everything is blended all consistently. Y'all have to kind of forgive me with this camera because I'm all alone and I'm trying to do this and also make the fudge with my with my left hand at the same time. So excuse me if I get a little off, but we will get this in. Okay. And then what's going to happen is as this boils, it'll start to bubble up, and it will bubble all the way up, and that's what we call a rolling boil. And once it gets to a rolling boil, then we will start to add in our sweetened condensed milk and our extract. So we're going to allow this to come to a boil. As you see around the edges, it's starting to bubble. And once it bubbles completely, then that's when we will remove it from the heat. And then we will add this can of sweetened condensed milk that we have here and our extracts, a teaspoon of each. And as you see, it started to come into a boil. Stir. Just to make certain that it is well blended. And then we're going to go ahead on and just let that do what it does. So we're going to allow that to come to a rolling boil. Now, while we're waiting on it to come to a rolling boil, as you see, it's starting to come to a rolling boil. We're going to go ahead and prepare our pan. Now, you can use the size pan depending on how thick you want your fudge. But this is the next size up. I think that would be a 14 by 16 maybe from the 13 by 9 pan. And I also use a full sheet pan, so that's all right if you do. Just use a very small amount, and I like to use that baker's jar with the flour in it, because that just the plain spray, like just the pan spray, it kind of seems to make it cook even more. Now what we're gonna do is put a piece of parchment paper in here inside that pan, and then we're gonna lightly spray that parchment paper and do the same thing. We want to spread that over that parchment paper. Now normally I would have a piece that extends beyond the pan, but I kind of ran out this morning, so this will be sufficient because all I need is just some on the side to be able to lift it up once I cut it when it starts to sit. So now we have here what we call a rolling boil. So what I'm going to do now is remove this from the heat over to another burner and add in our sweetened condensed milk and a teaspoon of extract. And once you've poured it all out, then just simply take a spatula and get all the rest of that out of the can. And then add your 2 teaspoons of extract. So we're going to do that right now.